before we conclude our lecture, or really two topics, but I'd like to cover an actual write-off problem. And in this problem, again, we have lots of information, so I'm going to make T accounts first so that I can kind of figure out what it's saying. And one will be for accounts receivable, the current asset, and one will be for the allowance for doubtful accounts, uncollectible accounts, or bad debts, which is its contra account. And it says that Colby Company, which uses the allowance method, which means that this company is accrual based, has accounts receivable balance at some time during the year of $65,000, and that the allowance account has a credit balance of $64,000. We then make a sale to Irma Hegerman for $7,200, and we know when we make a sale we're going to debit accounts receivable $7,200 and credit sales. And then we later received $2,400 from Hegerman, which means we're going to debit cash and credit accounts receivable, $2,400. The rest of the amount that was due from Hegerman had to be written off as uncollectible. So let's pause and figure out what is our balance before the write-off. And I can see that my accounts receivable has a balance of $69,800 at this point. So if I wanted to look at what my net accounts receivable were before the write-off, it would be the accounts receivable balance of $69,800 minus the allowance balance of $6,400. So the net realizable value is $63,400. Now, when we do a write-off, we have to figure out first how much we need to write off. Irma owed us $7,200. She paid us $2,400, so she still owes us $4,800. And so that's what we're going to write off. And we know that a write-off is a debit to the allowance for $4,800 and a credit to accounts receivable for $4,800. That means that the balance in the accounts receivable after write-off is $65,000, and the balance in the allowance account after the write-off is $1,600. So the question is after write-off, does that change the net realizable value? And it doesn't, because accounts receivable now has a balance of $65,000, allowance now has a balance of $1,600, so the net realizable value stays at $63,400. And this is a discovery that I hope you remember, that they are going to be exactly the same, because remember, the write-off entry is impacting two current assets, and so the net remains the same because the asset accounts differ by the same amount. So this is an example of a write-off problem.